So I talk a lot about film photography, analog photography on this channel, and I usually don't touch on the digital side of things, but I do have something I want to share when it comes to a really great beginner budget portrait setup for APS-C cameras. And since APS-C film is super dead, I hereby announce the first episode of
Digital.
If that scared you off, that's okay. So a while ago I was watching Mango Street. They're a fantastic photography YouTube channel. I'm sure everybody's heard of them. And this video in particular, they were talking about their wedding photography setup. And they mentioned that they only used a 35mm lens and an 85mm lens, which is really shocking since the 70-200 Canon is like a super revered classic for wedding photographers. And you know, they're super talented people, and I thought there's probably a reason. So I decided to try something similar out with my camera. So since APS-C cameras have a tighter field of view than full frame, I had to do a quick bit of math. The closest 35mm lens on a Canon camera that is affordable is the 24mm STM pancake lens, which is what all these videos are shot on. And the closest thing to the 85 is the Canon Nifty 50. It's the iconic 50mm 1.8 lens that everybody gets recommended when they first start photography. So I've been using this combo on portrait shoots, and I found it to be very versatile and really successful, so I totally see why they were using a 35 and an 85. So let me just go over the lenses in more detail so you can get a good idea if you're looking into getting into portrait photography or just kind of stepping up your game from your kit lens. So the 24mm is an EF-s lens, which means that the lens is only compatible with Canon crop sensor cameras. So this is anything like from the T series to the TI series, all the way up to the 7D. The 24mm field of view, which is just under 40 on the crop sensor camera, is wide enough to kind of contextualize your subject, but you're still able to give emphasis to your subject, which is very useful. The result is also a great walk-around lens, since it's so tiny. It's a pancake lens, and it doesn't make you have to back up 20 feet to get a picture of your friends or of scenery. The lens is a f2.8 lens. That just means the aperture kind of opens up wider than your kit lens, but kind of average for other prime lenses. There's two sides to that. The one side is that it is a super sharp lens even at f2.8 wide open, and the other side is that it's kind of okay for that depth of field effect where you have a blurry background. You can achieve that sometimes, but it is super sharp, and for general uses it's pretty good. The lens is just under $200 Canadian, and you can get it used for just over $100, which is it's a great price point for people first starting off, or any photographer on a budget. It's a very great lens. The second lens in the iconic duo is the 50mm 1.8. This is the STM version, but there are older versions. They've been making this lens since the film days. Here's the film version that's been around since forever. This was the kit lens that cameras came with. So it's an iconic classic, to say the least. So the 50mm 1.8 lens kind of follows that tradition. It's very cheap. It's made out of plastic, which is totally okay, but it does feel solid. The great thing about the 50mm lens on an APS-C camera is that its field of view gets tightened to about 80mm. That makes it a great portrait lens. You are able to get a nice depth of field effect with the f1.8 aperture, which is wide and pretty good for prime lenses. So if you're planning on doing portraits, this lens is really a go-to if you want those kind of headshots with very blurry backgrounds. It will definitely make your photography look much more pro. And the great thing about this lens is that it's the cheapest lens that Canon makes. It's just over $800 Canadian new, and you can find it used in all its different versions of, there's the Mark II and then the Mark I, which is a bit more rare. And they can all be found for under $100, so if you're willing to go into the used market, I definitely recommend. You'll save a lot of money. So the way the duo works together is that the 24mm lens is able to contextualize your subject, so if you're shooting in a setting that you really want to capture, if you want to emphasize the background and the way it relates to your subject, the 24mm is the way to go. It's also great for group shots. The deeper depth of field that this lens has makes it great because you can really make sure everything's in sharp focus and that everything's emphasized. And then the 50mm comes in when you want to get in tighter and you want to isolate your subject from the background. So along with your kit lens that the camera probably came with, this is probably the first couple steps that you want to take in getting good looking professional pictures with your portraits.